Today I want to discuss with you the changes made to the multiplayer version of StarCraft 2, and in particular the 1 versus 1 aspect. I want to go over the different changes that have been announced and added to the game and talk about how they will impact the different matchups. In recent weeks we've been assessing several slight changes to multiplayer balance. As we've stated before, our overall goal in doing this has been to reach a place of ultimate gameplay stability, enabling players to truly master their game's many units, builds, strategies and metagames. After seeing how these changes should affect the game and continuing to monitor known areas for improvement, we're prepared to move forward today with several minor changes to multiplayer balance, which we hope will shift the game more towards our goal. Thank you all for the feedback over the past few months in helping come up with these changes. So these right here are the changes. Now, as is pointed out, it's not like a massive overhaul. However, I think it will be a very impactful change to most of the professional level of play. And I feel like that is the one thing that we need to discuss as much as we possibly can. Now, let me know what your thoughts are as well down below in the comment section of the video. But please keep in mind, this is a balanced video, so some people may be pretty upset, okay? But let's try and behave and not get too emotional here. Let's discuss the changes. So first off, we've got the Terran Reaper. The KD8 or the KD8 charge cooldown increased from 7 to 14 seconds. Now the KD8 charge is apparently the name of the grenade that the Reaper throws forward. I didn't know that either, but I mean, it has been basically doubled as far as the cooldown goes. And I feel like the most common reason why this might want to be changed is the fact that 3 Rex Reaper all-ins, in particular against Terran and Zerg, are quite common. I feel like in Terran vs Zerg, it's the easiest way of talking about it because it's a relatively common strategy, in particular at the professional level of play. The KD8 charge is obviously a very annoying ability. It basically gets thrown on the ground, then it explodes and units get knocked back, right? Now, does exactly changing the cooldown change the outcome of those games? Because let's talk about it for just a little bit, right? If you're going for the 3 Rex Reaper play and you're making continuous Reapers, generally speaking, you're gonna try and get an expansion and whatnot behind it. You're trying to really like zone your opponent out of their base, eventually try and overpower them, kill a queen or two, or maybe, you know, kill your opponent's SCV that's building a command center on the low ground and therefore obtain the victory. Because if you manage to do that, you will definitely become significantly more powerful and more than likely you will be able to overwhelm your opponent. Now, will this really change up that scenario? I feel like it really will not. If you look at like the top level Terran players in the world, none of them are like spamming the mines, okay? The only time that they spam mines is when the Terran player is going up against, for example, a Zerg that's building a spine crawler, right? Say you're constructing a spine crawler to try and deal with the Reaper all-in, the Terran can just simply spam a bunch of mines and deal with the building unit altogether and basically never see that spine crawler come to life. At that point, the KD8 charge cooldown, I guess having a longer cooldown is going to be an improvement. But really, at like the professional level of play, none of the Zerg players are responding with like static defense. And obviously in Terran versus Terran, that's not really going to be affected either. It's not as common in TVP regardless though. I feel like that really doesn't affect that cooldown all too much. And on top of that, like none of the Terran players otherwise are really spamming their mines, at the very least if they're very good at it. Instead, what I really would have liked to see is either just simply remove the mine altogether. That seems to be a common thing on the ladder, as well as like on forums and Reddit right now, over the last few months, where people were talking about just simply removing the mine altogether. And generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of removing abilities, but I feel like since the ability can be a little bit buggy at times as well, it's not even that bad of a choice. I actually would not be against that. Or secondly, to simply not allow it to deal any damage to buildings. And I feel like that would also be a great addition right here, because changing the cooldown really won't affect the desired outcome. Instead, it would really just nerf like the very first scouting Reaper, and while the goal of that Reaper is to mostly just look around the bases, I suppose, and get some more intel, sometimes it's able to like pick up a worker or two as well. I feel like it will mostly just reduce the effectiveness of that very first Reaper. Now in Terran vs Terran in particular, if you lose your very first Reaper, and you did not make a second one, that can be game over right then and there, because you're just simply going to be able to counter your opponent's SCV that's building a command center, or you can, you know, just so much slow down your opponent. I feel like removing the mine altogether would just make Terran vs Terran a lot more enjoyable as well, but we'll see if that's going to happen, because generally speaking, Blizzard doesn't like removing abilities either, but at least it's a step in the right direction. We've got the Widowmine changed right here as well. Splash damage plus shield bonus reduced from plus 40 to plus 25. So notice right here, it says plus damage to shield as well. That does mean that this is a change that is just very specifically for the Terran versus Protoss matchup. And over the last couple of months, ever since like BlizzCon and the patch changes in like patch 3.8 or so, where they basically overhauled all of multiplayer, Terran versus Protoss has been very heavily in favor of Terran players. I mean, the imbalance got to a point where it was very close to the Wings of Liberty imbalance of Terran versus Zerg initially, where like Terran was just simply winning all of those games, and it got very close to those win rates once again. Protoss was just simply struggling. However, a couple of months went by and Protoss strategies have been evolving, and in particular over the last few weeks, Protoss players, and most namely Stats, have been coming up with new builds that really have been countering Terran quite nicely. I've actually been really impressed by his playstyle. We obviously did see a minor nerf to Liberators as well, making them slight bit weaker as well. That did most definitely affect Terran versus Protoss too. But I feel like Protoss players are slowly adjusting. Now, reducing the amount of shield splash damage that the Widowmine does will most definitely change up the outcome. I'm a little bit worried for example, like 2 base, 8 gateway adept all-ins, because those are already very powerful builds that Terran can be caught off guard with. And like the counter to it, as soon as you scout it with Terran, right, is to just simply start building up a bunch of Widowmines. Those Widowmines will be much less effective, so I'm a little bit worried that this will affect that matchup a little too much. Now, one important thing, by the way, to keep in mind about this is that the Widowmine splash damage gets reduced, but not the initial impact damage, okay? So a Widowmine has got 2 different kinds of damage. First off, it's got the initial impact damage and then the splash damage as well. The impact damage of the initial hit does not get affected. What that means is that a Widowmine will still be one-shotting and flying by Oracle, and it will still be one-shotting all of the gateway units, right? So that is something very important to keep in mind. So this is mostly as meant of like a mid to late game kind of change, where Protoss may very well be able to start tipping it in their favor once again. And let's be honest, Protoss versus Terran hasn't been particularly great for Protoss players as of late, so this may very well be enough to tip the skills back in favor of Protoss, but I wonder if it could not be a little too much. Maybe I'm wrong though. Now Zerg players rejoice, because Zerg players have managed to get 2 buffs. The first one was expected, the second one to the Corruptor, I personally did not really expect it to make it all the way through, but let's talk about it for just a little bit. So first off, we got the Zerg Hydralisk, the health increase from 80 to 90. Now this will obviously impact all of the Zerg matchups, right? Because it's just a straight up buff to the Hydralisk. First off, let's talk about it against Protoss. When you go up against Protoss, there are like 2 common strategies from Protoss players. First off, you got the macro focus style, where they make robotics based units and they try their very best to like slow down the Zerg. They go for Warp Prism Harass, they go for all kinds of play, right? And I like that style a lot. I love watching that. I think it's an absolute blast to play against as well. It's a very powerful strategy for Protoss as it is right now, but I feel like Zerg has got their ways to deal with it. The second way that Protoss can play Terran versus, or Zerg versus Protoss right now rather, is to simply turtle up, get a bunch of Stargates, and start producing a lot of carriers. And that is also a reasonably popular strategy for Protoss players. And while Zerg is reasonably okay with dealing with it, in particular like the +2/+2 Queen Hydra or Corruptor switch into like 70 workers or so, and you know, you basically just start pushing and try and slow them down. If it manages to max out, all of a sudden that will make it significantly harder for the Zerg player to kill, and in many instances nearly impossible, even with like a massive superior army and economy as well. When it comes to like the Hydralisk health change, I feel like this is an absolutely great change against, in particular, that Turtle Skytoll style. I mean, like I said, 70 workers, +2/+2, Hydra Queen, move across the map, try and kill it before it maxes out is a great way of already dealing with the carriers, and this will make it even better. I feel like the health increase will be superb, because basically for every 8 Hydralisk, you just get like an additional 1, right? And if you've got 40 Hydralisk, that adds up very, very quickly. However, I'm a little bit worried that this would be too much against like the other strategy that's common for Protoss, like the robotics facility gateway based one. Hydras are already like the most common unit in that scenario, like Zergling, Baneling, Hydralisk, or like Ravagerling, Bane, Hydra. It's some of those kind of units. It's already a very common unit in that regard, and it's already super powerful as well. And I'm a little worried that it may become a little too strong. Now, of course, you gotta keep in mind, Liberators, or not Liberators, rather, Disruptors, Colossi, High Templar, they're still very good at dealing with the Hydra. But regardless, I feel like in early game kind of scenarios, before Protoss manages to get all of that splash damage out, I feel like the Hydra may be a little bit too strong. You know, when it's not that like turtle-based Protoss style, and in particular with the other change that we got as well to the Corruptor, that I'll talk about in just a little bit. So Hydra change to Zerg versus Protoss, I quite like it, but it may be too much. When it comes to Zerg versus Terran, there are two strategies that you can see on the ladder in particular, and that is Terran Mech as well as Terran Bio. Now, at the professional level of play, Terran Bio is most definitely the common strategy, because Terran Mech can still be quite easily countered by Zerg players. I mean, a lot of them just simply focus on like swarm host based style. They go for a lot of Hydralisk in that regard as well, and it will most definitely make it much more difficult with this change right here to try and make the mechanical based unit work. And while it is common on the ladder, playing against it in professional tournaments, it's pretty much unheard of. Like, not a lot of Protoss, or not a lot of Terran players rather, are playing Terran Mech to begin with, and this will only make that strategy even weaker. The other factor, and like the other side of that coin, I suppose, is when Terran players go for bio-based styles, right? They go, for example, for like Terran Marines, Medevacs, Widowmines, Siege Tanks, and all that sort of shenanigans. The most common strategy by far right now. The Hydralisk health increase really won't change in that regard. I mean, the bio units will still just be able to tear their way through Hydras, and I highly doubt that you ever want to make Hydras in that regard. I mean, you're better off just simply making Queens and teching up faster, or making Mutalisk and just simply getting those out, because they're much more mobile and it can much easier pick off Medevacs as well. And I feel like the Hydralisk in that regard would be a bit of a flimsy kind of unit, and I don't really like playing Terran or Hydralisk against Terran Bio myself. And, you know, when I play Terran Bio myself and I go up against someone who makes Hydralisk, I just stim and, like, push forward. It's pretty straightforward. So I feel like this could potentially hurt Terran Mech quite a bit, as well as, like, the standard, quote-unquote standard, Terran versus, or Protoss versus Zerg style with the robotics play, right? Now, last but not least, I actually really do like this change for Zerg versus Zerg. Hydras have become a little bit more uncommon. You see it sometimes when Zerg players are, for example, like switching into lurker play, and they sort of like a stepping stone, but you're trying to like basically get out of that as soon as you possibly can, because Hydras are a bit of a weak choice. This will make them significantly better, and also against like unexpected muta switches, you can actually potentially make Hydralisk and still stop that. So I quite like the change in that regard, because it won't really affect the other outcomes of those matchups all too much. It just makes the defensive player a bit of a better, like, I guess in a bit of a more powerful position, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I like it for Zerg versus Zerg. Zerg versus Terran, I don't think will affect bio play at all, and I'm worried for Mech. And, you know, versus Protoss, I feel like I've discussed it in depth. Great against Stargate play, but in the other ones, it may be a little bit too overpowered. But all in all, I do like to change this, because, I mean, I'm still a Zerg player at heart, and, you know, the Hydralisk is going to be becoming a little bit more powerful. But I wonder if it's not a little bit too much. The last changes right here are to the Corruptor, and like I said, I did not expect these changes to make it all the way through, but the Corruptor has got a couple of changes. So first off, we've got the movement speed change from 4.1 to 4.7. The acceleration speed of the unit changed from 3.6 to the 4.2, and that basically means the amount of time it takes for the Corruptor to get to its maximum amount of movement speed, which has indeed been increased. And then we also got the Parasite Spore weapon damage point changed from 0.11 to 0.04. And this last one may need a little bit more explaining. Basically, the weapon damage point is the micro ability, I suppose, is the easiest way to point it out, of a unit. So say, for example, you're trying to kite backwards with a Corruptor and you're trying to shoot. There's gonna be a little bit of target fire, basically there's gonna be a little bit of delay between you target firing when you're in range of a unit and the Corruptor actually shooting. And with this change right here, that Corruptor shooting point and the amount of time it takes in between, it's basically in milliseconds, is going to be reduced a bunch. So that means that the unit is going to be a little bit more microable, I suppose. I feel like this is a cool change. I actually quite like it. Now, once again, I may be a little bit Zerg biased in this regard, but once more, I am a little worried here for, in particular, the Zerg versus Terran matchup when the Terran player is going for Mech. When you go for mech as the when you go for mech as the Terran player, you need to also have that air superiority. You can do so with Thors quite easily, but Brute Lords can become a bit of a scary switch, and of course, Vikings will not be able to quite easily kite down these Corruptors anymore with that change. On top of that, I feel like it could potentially hurt bio styles as well, because right now the common switch for Zerg is to go for a few Corruptors and use them to go up to Brute Lords, right? Now, in the past, you could actually counter the Corruptors quite easily with Vikings, and you could try and counter, for example, the Brute Lords with Vikings as well. However, with the additional movement speed, I mean, in the past, you may want to try and, you know, not overcommit with Corruptors. Right now, they're going to be much faster, so you can just simply fly away when the Vikings show up, right? And you should be able to keep your Brute Lords alive much easier as well. And of course, the famed counter to that stuff would be the Ghost, but I feel like it may be a little too much in that regard as well. But of course, it's mostly movement speed, so it may not affect it all too much, but it's going to be a little bit more tricky for Terran players in the later stages of the game. When it comes to Protoss versus Zerg, I feel like, you know, Corruptors aren't all that common, like, to begin with. Of course, it will once again help out with that turtle Protoss style when they try and go up to carriers. That will be completely shut down with this as well. Mostly because of the Hydra change, but most definitely with the Corruptor. But I feel like what will mostly affect this, and what makes this really interesting, and what I personally look really forward to trying out mostly, is going to be the Mutalisk Corruptor style. So as it is right now, whenever you go Mutas and your opponent counters with, like, Phoenixes, you're gonna have to switch up into something else. But I feel like a switch to Corruptors is gonna be great, because the Corruptor can actually fly together with the Mutas and get a lot more damage done that way. So it's gonna be really difficult to establish that air superiority. Also in the past, like, if your opponent would be going for, like, Blink Stalker, you would have a very hard time flying away with your Corruptors because they're not that fast. Right now, when you're going up against Blink Stalker, sure, you may lose one or two, but your Corruptors are just gonna fly out. Which is gonna be interesting to see as well. So I really do like that Corruptor change. Hydra change may be a little bit too much. Same obviously goes for, like, Zerg versus Zerg as well. If we would ever get to the point where, once again, Muta versus Muta battles are gonna be the standard, which it was for a very long time, Corruptor Muta may become a lot more interesting as well, because once again, the Corruptors will have a much easier time at keeping your Mutalisk up as well. And obviously, Corruptors are way better at dealing anti-air damage to your opponent's players' Mutalisks as well when you got those going. So we'll see how that will affect that matchup. But regardless, I do like the changes to the Corruptor. So the Hydra change, not entirely sure. Maybe overpowered. Corruptor change, I quite like it. I personally quite like it. Widowmine change, probably could be too much, but we'll see. I actually do like this change. And the Reaper change, I feel like it doesn't really touch the point that's trying to be changed there. Instead, then I would either like to see the ability to not deal any damage to buildings, or more importantly, for it to just simply be removed out of the game. I don't think anyone would truly miss an ability that's kind of, you know, random. Anyway, let me know once again what your thoughts are on these changes down below in the comment section of the video. I would love to read it. If you could please try and keep it civil, I mean, that would be good. I understand, though, that I'm discussing balance here, so people are always going to get upset, and, you know, I'm stepping on some toes here, but regardless, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, and if you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. And while you're at it, you can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Links are in the description. I want to thank you very much so for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I'll see you in the next one.